GM fam, welcome. An exciting week in the world of Ethereum. In addition to all the activity regarding the Curve smart contract, the crvUSD finally seeing a front-end repo, we also saw the Bellatrix final step before the merge takes place happen. So a lot of confluence of exciting activity. Excited to be able to chat with all of you this morning. There's so much going on. I wanted to keep this as open for questions and as open to the community as absolutely possible. So I see 6 concurrent viewers and at the same time just 0 concurrent viewers because some funky stuff going on with my account lately. But if you're here, feel free to drop some questions in the comments. Would be interested in hearing your thoughts, your questions. I could go ahead and elaborate as much as you all would like about curvUSD. The repository got published and we didn't get a full look at everything that's going on, but we learned a bit from it. So I would be interested in talking about that. GD, Christian Walsh, I've assumed that it is perhaps evening or afternoon where you are, which is fine. I hope that you've had a productive day so far and that you are in fact having a good afternoon. So I'm assuming there's no issues with the sound. I am traveling, so funky background, funky mechanics. Will curvUSD have any impact on curve utility? It's too early to say. So we saw from the repository a little bit of content, which is not nearly enough. But walking through the repository, we could learn some. So I can go ahead and walk through what we know of the repository from what's been made public. Let me just take a second and get this up. Let's see. See if we can connect this with, here we go. So this is the Curve GitHub, and this is by far, if you're not publishing your own code base, this is the best source of alpha you can get. Some cool stuff up here. I like this Brownie tutorial, which has gotten 111 stars, 27 forks. So hopefully that's been useful. Similarly, if you're looking to learn coding, this Viper tutorial that Curve offers is also very good. But what was really juicy was 21 hours ago, this curve-stablecoin.js appeared. And this has a lot of information. So if you're not familiar with programming, what's going on is that there's a front end. Curve has all these kind of beautifully archaic front ends. Oftentimes it's kind of like looking like Windows 95 to 98. There's also the brilliant architecture that's going on in the back end. This is the smart contract layer. This is what's deployed to the Ethereum blockchain. A ton of exciting stuff exists there. While you're on the Curve backend, you can navigate with this directly using Ethereum, directly using Brownie. There's a lot of ways to attack this, but this here provides an interface so that front ends can build against it. So we know enough about the kind of features that a front end will need to access, but we don't know what goes on under the hood. So this is like looking at the exterior of a car but not getting to see under the hood to see what the engine looks like. Maybe it's empty, or maybe it's incredibly superpowered. Time is going to tell. So the way that it interacts with Curve, we would need to see a bit more about the actual mechanics under the hood to know what's going to go on there. So scrolling down here, we can start to get a sense. This here is just some initialization functions. But at this point, we get the more general methods, and we can kind of get a sense of what things look like. And right off the bat is one of the things that some people were noticing, which is that very clearly there's a lot of ETH serving as collateral for the curvUSD stablecoin. And we don't know yet if it's just if just Ethereum is going to be backing it, or if there's going to be other things. But when I read through this repository, I seem to read this as there's going to be other things backing it for a number of reasons. But most notably, if you have a function like this where you are calling, in this case, ETH by ID, you don't really want to set an ID if it's hard-coded to ETH. There's no sense in doing this. Similarly, like things like collateral decimals, not really a sense in not really a sense in making this explicit. If you're only using ETH, then you'll just hard code that to 18 and save the storage space. Curve people are relentless gas optimizers, so there's not really a reason to have this as a flag that you can pass unless there's going to be other collateral types. But this is just my inference. It's also entirely possible that they are trying to future-proof this and plan for future expansion. So maybe it's the case that there is only going to be ETH to start with, and they're going to plan to add other things as we go through. Christian Walsh, you say it's almost evening here. You're keen to hear what I think about Curve stablecoin repo, and also I think about liquidity leading up to the merge. Very excited about the merge. I was able to successfully get my staking node going yesterday. So I had some rough starts. I lost a little money, but it is now net positive. I got it in just before the Bellatrix fork, so I got to see that come in live. So exciting time. If you look at the overall staking, I'll try and get the numbers up here. If you look at the overall number of people staking, it's actually not, it's kind of tapering off. So I think that we have a sense of how many people are going to be staking going into things. Let me keep walking through through some of the things here that I noticed from this particular, from this repo, because this repo tells us all the broad contours that we need to know to understand the rough composition of this, how the stablecoin is going to interact. And here, let me just walk through this via the article. Congratulations to ChegoOX for breaking the news here. Technically, I broke the news about 15 minutes before him, but he's the first non-shadow banned person to have released the news, so he got the lion's share of the likes on that. And well-deserved. If you're not following ChegoOX, this is the sort of alpha you're missing out on, so strongly recommend. He's also very active with the StakeDAO team. The other thing that we see is that crvUSD is not going to launch till after the merge. This is just a common sense precaution, so we're not likely to see many things coming. And then Moonfrog jokes that we should perhaps see if OX Chad is going to do us the honor of launching this contract, because why not? When I interviewed Charlie a few months ago, I asked him if they found who OX Chad is, and he said that they still have not figured out exactly who he is. So it's possible that if OX Chad has access to the contract, they could deploy it. OX Zeno here had a really good take. He also ripped through the code base and described all the basic contours of what we should expect. So he points to some of the things in the code base that are mentioned, and we'll see exactly what role they play. There's a Llama wallet that's referenced, the capability of doing some standard lending-based token things, adding collateral, borrowing, repaying, checking on the health of a loan. So all this very much mimics what we've seen from other lending protocols. We know there's at least one, maybe two novel things in this curvUSD design. So any of the things referenced here are not yet necessarily novel. There is this concept of self-liquidation and swaps, which we'll talk about in a second. And Naga King, who is also another criminally underfollowed person that leaks tremendous alpha. So both these people are definitely recommended for follows. Oxino and Naga King. Naga King reads this that there's some sort of on-chain llama herding mechanism. Animal husbandry. We'll have to see. I think animal husbandry may be illegal. So, at any rate, I identified 6 takeaways, very similar to OX Zeno's takeaways. But there are 6 things that caught my eye from this code base. And I do have to admit that I know a bit more about this code base because I've gotten a chance to see a bit more than has been released publicly. I've gotten to read the white paper. So I'm not leaking any alpha here, though. I'm just going through and reading and seeing what could be picked out from the present information that's been divulged. So the most exciting thing is this kind of LLAMMA, the misspelling of llama. And this has been teased at extensively. So we saw that another... Like, the whole thesis of this is that there's a bunch of criminally underfollowed accounts on Twitter. OXLLAMMA, which is OXLLAM4, has a phenomenal alpha to follower ratio, probably the best. It's under 1,000 followers, which doesn't make any sense. But OXLLAMMA was the first to leak that this redacted white paper written by Michael Egorov, where right in the first paragraph, they describe LLAMMA. So we know it's going to be pretty important. And one of the nice things that came amidst this flurry of stuff yesterday was Julian Curve core team member, revealing that LLAMMA stands for Lending Liquidating AMM Algorithm. So we have some context into what's going on under the hood with this Curve stablecoin. There's going to be lending, liquidating, and an AMM built into the algorithm. We got a chance to actually see a bit more into LLAMMA within the code base. So specifically, when you're dealing with any smart contract, it has what's called an ABI, which is a way that you can interface with the smart contract. Essentially, it gets published as bytecode. You don't know what the different bytecode represents, but when you have an ABI, you know what the names of the functions are, and you can call them using the much more friendly names of the functions. So if you want to see the ABIs, they're here in this source constants ABIs folder. ERC20JSON is just a standard ERC20, but there's a controller ABI and a LLAMMA ABI, which is explicitly going to be the interface that allows us to see what the function names are under the hood here. So if you want to read through it, pay attention to these different names. So these are starting with several different events that get emitted. But if you look at the names, you can see what exactly is going on. So there's a token exchange event. Why do you have token exchange? Well, we said it's an AMM, so maybe there's something going on with that. There's a deposit, there's a withdraw event, there's a set rate event, a set admin fee event, and price oracles, which we'll talk about in a second. And here's another piece that leads me to believe that it's that there is going to be different collateral. This here is the initialization function, which means when this contract is created, it gets initialized with some of these properties. And one of the things that's being added is the collateral token. If ETH is the only collateral, there's no reason to waste the extra gas to hardcode this. So you can get a sense of some of these functions. And what we see throughout is most of these functions are decorated as view functions, which means that the state mutability doesn't change. It's not writing anything in the blockchain. But there's a lot of functions that we're reading from the blockchain. So we get a lot of kind of like information out of the contract, but very few events going into it. Notably those kind of exchange, add and remove liquidity type things. But then most of these are like hardcore math. So p current up, p current down, p oracle up, p oracle down. These are view functions, get y0, get p. To me, this hints that there's going to be an extensive amount of math being done under the hood on this contract. So again, here's a non-payable one. So this one, deposit range, which is, talk about that one in a second. Pretty intense stuff, though, when we get into it. Non-payable means that it is a contract that is modifying the blockchain. So it's actually doing something. So it's not a view, but you can't wire Ether directly to it, which is why it's non-payable. But here you're withdrawing. But a lot of these are just kind of heavy math. So we know that Curve contracts use a lot of math. Here's another get Y up that sounds like a math function. Get X down, get sum XY. Get amount for price. Like a lot of math is being done within this contract. So we should probably expect that this llama is going to involve an intense amount of math. What else is new? So the only state modifying functions are these here. I picked these out. Here we also get a chance to see how the llama ID is called. Getting the address, and then this controller contract is the other ABI, which I didn't walk through. The controller ABI has a lot more functions that actually modify the state. And here you see kind of the functions that you would expect to see from a typical lending protocol, like create a loan, add collateral, borrow more, repay, liquidate. So these are the sort of functions that you would expect to see. So just extrapolating what the architecture looks like, we see that each controller is tied to a llama contract, and each llama contract gets initialized with some of these properties. So you might imagine that, for example, a new llama contract gets created for different forms of collateral, and as this collateral gets added, or as these new contracts get deployed, they have a controller tied to it. The controller is what the user interfaces with. The user will call the controller, manage their position, and then the controller will be tied perhaps to the llama contract, and then the llama contract in aggregate will manage all of its internal liquidity. That's my rough understanding of the architecture from what we've seen so far. Second thing that stood out, I said there were 6 things that stood out. Just the first L in Llama is lending. What's being lent? We talked about this already, and there's been some concern that there's only going to be ETH as collateral. And we do see this if we look in the README file. It continually references ETH. So it's loading a llama as ETH. And again, my interpretation of this is that this ID in this particular case is ETH, but there may be other llamas for other forms of collateral, which you would call by passing the associated ID. But then the flip side of this is maybe this is just future proofing and it's only going to start with ETH. We don't know yet. This is entirely extrapolation. One other thing that makes me suspect that there's other forms of collateral is if you look at this several lines of code here, the wallet balances for Llama, there's what looks like a typo to me in that there's this dangling SAAVE variable. And this is not called or referenced anywhere. And SAAVE is a curve pool. There's a curve staked Aave pool. It's not referenced anywhere else in the contract. So it would actually, like if you're going to instantiate a variable in JavaScript, you have to do it like this. You have to declare it. So since it's not declared, I'm assuming that this is a typo. And that perhaps there was some other code that was working with a different llama that was connected to SAAVE instead of ETH. Again, just all speculation. Could just be tests to keep it future-proof. We're not sure. But this implies to me that there's probably going to be different controller contracts as well as different llama contracts for different forms of collateral. And then who knows how it gets deployed. Maybe it's going to be the DAO that deploys it. Maybe it's going to be specifically anyone can deploy it like a factory. We'll have to wait and see. The third thing I noticed is the liquidation mechanisms. So we've seen in the past that there is what's referred to as quote-unquote a novel liquidation mechanism. And separately, I forgot to include this in the article. I'll probably update this. In a Telegram or Discord chat, we saw that Fiddy was commenting also that there is... lousy Twitter. We also saw that it's absolutely capable of... there's going to be a few novel things that we haven't really seen anything novel just yet, except for maybe the sort of AMM piece of it. So we do know that one of the things that's declared to be novel is the liquidation mechanism. So far, the liquidation mechanisms look fairly standard. There's what looks like this, just a sort of standard liquidation. Here you can see it's checking your balances. In this case, this particular liquidator wallet balance sees 301 worth of stablecoin and 0.86 worth of collateral. Whereas this particular user has a helpful 0.139 in collateral, presuming this is ETH, 2,751 worth of stablecoin balance, and $3,000 worth of debt. So then an external user goes in, sees how much they could get, how many tokens it would cost to liquidate. 301.53 is the difference between the stablecoin amount and the debt. When they... The liquidator wallet fortunately has this exact amount in their wallet. So when they call this liquidation function, they have drained the 301 from their wallet and they've received the remainder in collateral. So this implies that there's going to be essentially the capability of random people coming in, liquidating, and after that the stated liquidated account has been wiped clean. It's 000 across the board. So we've seen other lending protocols operate this way, where they actually like rely on kind of roving bands of people to go through and run these trigger liquidations. And whoever does the liquidation can actually get really good prices on things. So we'll have to see exactly what goes on with that. But again, fairly standard. The other thing that we see is self-liquidation. And this is just a sort of nice feature where you can trigger the liquidation for yourself, it looks like, instead of allowing other people to get it. So in this case, for example, the wallet wants to get their collateral back, so they go ahead and trigger liquidation on themselves. All right, now we get into some of the fun things. I said there are 6 things that kind of we got to pick out from this repository, but in this case, it is one of the interesting things is this native swap feature, which is referred to throughout the repository. So here I picked out just the README example. And in this case, you're looking at a Llama wallet with a balance of same balance as before, 301 stablecoins and 0.86 in collateral. And here it's not a liquidation that's being triggered, but it's actually looking to try and like calculate the current price impact that you would make for swapping some balance of this and running the swap directly. Here we're working on Ethereum, so the prices do kind of make sense. In this case, we're trying to take what looks like $100 worth of the stablecoin in this balance and swap it for the collateral underneath. So in other words, this starts at $301 and a collateral of 0.86, and they run this transaction internally and end up with $100 less of the stablecoin, but about $100 more worth of ETH, 0.03 ETH. So I haven't seen this, and this might hint at some of the kind of novel mechanics going on under the hood, in that this is allowing you to have a stable coin that's minted by this kind of blend of a position between collateral and the stable coin, but to trigger an exchange under the hood between these assets. So this is kind of hinting at the built-in AMM facet of the LLAMMA, and that it has the functions you would expect from an AMM, like calculating price impact, calculating how much you might expect, and there's other functions that are described as protecting against possible slippage. So this is where we start to see some of the novel mechanics leaking in, and that there's actually seems to be an AMM connected with this curve stablecoin, which is not something I've seen. So keep an eye on in particular on this concept of swapping. Two more interesting things I wanted to highlight from this repository. Oracles. Curve has never used price oracles. Their V2 pools are themselves maintain an internal oracle based on trading behavior. And based on this, it infers the prices of assets. But for the first time, we're actually seeing Curve referencing an external oracle with their contracts. They have functions that allow perhaps an admin or somebody to set oracles, as well as to retrieve oracle prices. And we also see that this is kind of working its way into some of the math. So here I highlighted some code where we see oracle prices are increasing or decreasing, and that's affecting some of the math under the hood. So we don't know what these oracles look like. Is it Chainlink? Don't know. Is it going to be maybe Curve V2 pools? How are they going to protect against some of the hacks that happen because of oracles? We just don't really know, but it's something to keep an eye on as we start to get more details. Keep an eye on these oracles. And then finally, the last thing that is worth diving into is this concept that we see frequently throughout the code. So we know it's important of ticks, bands. They have a few different terms, and it's not clear if they refer to the exact same concept or if it's synonymous. But here I've highlighted in just the process, the basic process of creating a loan. There's this create loan ticks built right into it. And elsewhere we see that loan ticks can run between about 5 and 50. So this is kind of at the higher end of that range of ticks. And in this stats part of the README, we get a perhaps related, but I think might be slightly different concept of bands, in that ticks have to be between between 5 and 50, whereas bands here can run between 0 and 15. But here we see some of the mechanics behind these bands. Earlier we referenced this concept of kind of stablecoin and collateral as a blend, which meant that previously we saw there was like a wallet that had $300 worth of stablecoin and 0.8 Ethereum in it. And broken out into these band balances within the stats here, we see that there's 15 bands, and of these 15 bands, it's set to 11 is the active band, and anything below 11, there's no balances. So maybe anything in bands 0 through 10 got liquidated, and then perhaps band 11 here is the active band, where maybe there's active liquidations happening. Here we see a balance of $300 in stablecoins and 0.002 as collateral. So band 11 is mostly weighted towards the stablecoin and very little towards collateral. So maybe this is like in the process of liquidating or something. We don't quite know. But then everything from 12 to 15 has no stablecoin balance and is all collateral. So we don't exactly know what these bands refer to, but clearly it's very fundamental to how this is operating. And here you might recall Uniswap v3 uses these different price ranges. So Uniswap v3 is where you actually set your band of liquidity to, like, say, I think the USDC, USDT price will be between 0.95 and 1.05, and you provide liquidity just for that band or for that tick. And it seems like this concept might be expanded upon or used in some way in the curve-USD. So a lot of exciting stuff or interesting things that we can look at, even though we don't have a full picture. It's starting to congeal a little bit. So this was what I saw reading through the code base. Of course, the code base is quite involved. I don't speak JavaScript very well, so there is perhaps a lot more to it. But I'd be interested in seeing what any of you are able to get from this. Like, you can see a few concepts here. This health factor, which can tick above 100%. Here are these ticks. So this countermands what I said about ticks being maxed out at 50, because this tick here is maxed out at 163. So I must have misinterpreted those ticks. Still trying to dive through this. Already, as we can see, it's fairly complicated, and we haven't even gotten into the smart contract side of things. So if definitely interested in hearing any questions that you might have about this Curve stablecoin repository, or anything else that you see, or any questions you have generally. As I mentioned, it's an exciting time for Ethereum because we have the merge coming up very soon. Bellatrix happened without incident this morning. But I'm not seeing any questions, so perhaps I scared all of you away. We're managing 15 viewers, which is pretty good. Let's see. No, I'm not seeing any questions, so I will go ahead and call it then. I've yacked long enough. I'm going to go enjoy some coffee. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and look forward to, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them on Twitter, in the comments, etc. Always happy to kind of answer these things. Very, very interesting stuff. Very exciting time for Curve and for Ethereum in general.